Howdy, all you delicious people. I'm here today to view Loose Cannons. So, this movie is to be about a man named Ellis who is to decide to go on and rejoin the police force, but it seems that he is to have a quirk about him. And we would come to find that Ellis, the further he is to be put back into the force and be involved in situations that are to have violence within them or are to have other things go on, that is to then turn around and have Ellis start to get into these episodes and into these personalities to become a very much Looney Tune-ish or cartoonish show movie character, of which that he uh, within his mind so desires, to try to figure a way out of these situations or scenarios, to lend a hand to his actual partner, who is MacArthur, who is Mac, who is also to be Gene Hackman in this film. Really, like, I think my main intrigue upon this movie is, normally I'm not a buddy cop movie, but there has to just be something unique about the film to then get me to just be wanting of real interest. A lot of this movie is to be somewhat strange of how all of this is to be put together. But it's really whatever. It's really just kind of like, hey, let's just kind of check out this kind of unusual cop film. And so, and I'll go on and explain that a little, but let me compare first. So, this movie, of course, easily compares to the Dragnet film with Dan Aykroyd and Tom Hanks. And, of course, Who Framed Roger Rabbit, because we have a tune and a very straight guy. And then, of course, I'd probably have to compare this to Monk, Will Trent, and then also just a little tiny bit of just kind of Dexter, because Dexter is to be a forensic investigator that eventually is to be more and more tied to the cases that are kind of going on within this police department. And whereas, like, Dexter ends up just kind of becoming a killer in that show, Ellis, within this movie, is to just kind of become tied to Mac, this detective, and is trying to solve this case while also having these sporadic episodes of turning into these other personality slash character things. Uh, Really, probably a lot of this movie might really just be for that time. Specifically, we would have stuff like Butch and Sundance that is to be referenced in this film, and I don't know how many people really legitimately know about Butch and Sundance. But then also, there is to be a number of other kind of things in here that will also like state like the time of the film, with like the laugh of the Woody Woodpecker, or the entire cast of the original Star Trek original series, and just kind of a number of things that would probably just be so old fashioned that people may not be remembered, or remembering it, or may go on and just be people that are just be all well and knowledgeable of uh, this kind of stuff, luckily, and I just happen to uh, find those kind of people. But so, we would have these two buddy cops that are to be put in place of this kind of unusual, like, Alice in Wonderland uh, kind of Germans versus technically Jewish people, like case. And there ends up being a film of historical value to tie this chase around of us eventually trying to obtain this film, and who's going to get it at the end. Is it going to be the good guys? Is it going to be the bad guys? Or is it going to be the Israel's secret service that is to also be another entity trying to help out both Mac and Ellis's character within this film? So this movie, I would have to say, like, is it's just like okay, like it's still a thumbs up film, and I was to go on and find some bits and pieces of it just kind of funny. Um, but yeah, but this film may not just be for everybody, and I get that. Plus, also like it's a real stretch um, for people to really get into this kind of film and whatever. But like at the end of the day, like I just wanted to check this movie out. I just really wanted to go back into it and just kind of have just a cop movie because it's been such a long time. And I'm hoping eventually wanting to go on and try other cop movies at some certain point, especially if they are to be much more trending, probably like 48 Hours or um, like all those other like just buddy cop things that are to be kind of in that theme, but maybe aren't to be exactly that. Um, but there was also to be Black Rain that I've kind of stated that I've kind of had an interest in seeing, but who knows how if that's going to be any real legitimate kind of popularity whatsoever. I don't know. We'll figure that out. But anyways, so with that said, let's go on into full on spoilers about this film and really just kind of have a lot of fun about this movie because why not? So, with that said, where can you go on and see said loose cannons? Well, firstly, I feel that the only one that you can legitimately find this movie on is a app called Zelifonic, Zelivonic, and that is to be through a Google Play Store. If you probably are to go on through a Google search, you may find maybe possibly some random apps here and there that you may have to go on and spend a couple of bucks to probably rent this movie. I'm not quite sure because I didn't really check that out because I just kind of look through my normal apps that I go through. But so yeah, because all the other ones I tried to look into it and I couldn't have found it anywhere. So like Zellophonic is the only one that I'm probably going to just recommend for you today. So with that said, I'm going to go on as per usual and go into full blown spoilers of this film. And so that'll cause me to, of course, pause this video and, whip out my cast list and get whatever is to be upon my phone to help me figure out what had happened within all of this film or whatever is to just be remembered in this brain noggin of mine, which I, in time, will hopefully tell you the tale of this film. So with that said, I'm going to pause here, and we will be back with the whole rigmarole, because it is spoiler time. Spoiler time, it's about that time I'm going to spoil this movie. Alright. Beyond anything, if you have made it to this point in this video, thank you for going on and listening to what I have to say. Even though it may go on and just simply be what it was to have befallen upon this film, or maybe some little side notes and little things that I probably would want to have gone on and probably stated while watching this film at some point. Uh, but yeah, so thank you. I really do appreciate it. So, the very beginning of this tale is to have four people within inside a boat, hoping that this fog is to hide them from a guy named Grimmer. So, Grimmer is to go on and be looking for these people within this boat because they are to try and sneak away within their disguises of these bizarrish Alice in Wonderland like characters. And So Grimmer is to be trying to find these people within this fog, and so he is calling out for Steckler, stating that one of their friends is to have lost their head, and he is now dangling this head from off of this fishing pole. So Steckler and really just Harry, who is to be the Queen of Hearts here, are to the only out of the four be the real true characters that are going to matter here, because we'll find the White Rabbit and the Cheshire Cat are to kind of quickly be killed in the early parts of this movie, as well as also it seems there's going to be a finding of some unusual gorilla that ends up getting killed at some point in this film. I don't know why, or how that connects to what's going on here. But so we'd have our guys who are getting away from Grimmer. They are gunning their boat, hoping to then seek land and refuge. And they are running away from these people firing uh, from upon this boat, and they're firing wildly. So we'd have Harry that is to be jumping this fence, being, of course, assisted by certain people. And so the only two that, again, are to get out of this whole situation is Steckler and Harry, while the other two characters are to be gunned down and killed in close quarters. So we then are to show the other uh, people tied to this story, which is to be within Washington, D.C. And so we'd have MacArthur, who is Mac in this story, who is with a partner uh, who is uh, Drummond. Drummond in this film, it was just very weird or goofy, hard to pronounce, but he's played by David Alan Grier, who is an amazing talent. I've seen him in like Living Color and Jumanji, and I'm sure probably a number of other things that I'm probably not thinking of right now. But anyways, this film. So Mac and Drummond are at this hotel, and this female and male tenant kind of make their way out of these rooms, and they're in desperation to have these cops figure out a way to quiet these thriving couple that are going into this savage, almost wild jungle loving, and are making all of these monkey and wolf and whatever like sounds like the whole zoo is within this one room. So this one tenant is desperately asking these police officers, can you figure out a way to just like stop this noise for the night so we can all get some sleep? So Mac is really just like, what can I really do? What can I arrest them for? So like disturbing the peace and what, like, yeah, like I really have some neighbors of my own that go on and just nonstop like play like music so absurdly loud at one point during a holiday, like it shook my house. Like that's how loud that they just had to absurdly play music. Uh, but again, like that's just the thing that at some point I guess we've just gotten used to within our neighborhood forcibly. But so Mac goes on to make his way to this room to just be knocking at the door and wanting to trade coats with his partner, to then play out that he is to be this health department official, and that if the two of this couple are to not go on and practice safe sex, that they are going to somehow be in violation of some absurd code. And we would then have Mac, who's like, well, like obviously you should be probably very familiar with this code, or its possible violations. And the guy's like, oh no, I'm not familiar with this at all whatsoever. And so it's like, well, do you have a prophylactic, sir? Do you have a condom? And the guy's like, well, yeah, I had one in my wallet, but I just don't have one now. It's like, yeah. So they're to go on and trick these people and to stop that animal humping. And so Mac and the other Detective Drummond are to realize that it's like, okay, fine, like we finally figured out a way to just kind of trick these people into doing what we want them to do. So they walk off. So we would turn around and have Mac, who is walking out of the office, speaking with a detective named Westcott, and they're going on and talking about how, like Mac, for every time he has to possibly uh, like stop a hooker, that maybe they should have some signal being placed upon their vehicles of markers of such of the activity of which that they've done so and whatever. And Mac is just like, ha ha ha, yeah, whatever, Westcott. So they're going on to talk about possibly Mac's newest partner, and Westcott is saying like, well, nobody really wants to work with you, so if anything, we're just gonna kind of shove you with this new guy. And it's like, oh, okay, all right, like something I'm not exactly new or familiar with. But so we have Westcott realizing that for how much that Mac is kind of cleaning up his car, Westcott realizes that it seems that this car is just somehow, because it's called a Woody, is to possibly symbolize uh, Mac's manhood, his wiener, his down belows. So, and then of course, Westcott makes a joke about like, well, hey, like it definitely should not be this size. It should be much more of a compactor, a little bit smaller or whatever. And Mac starts to go on and laugh at Westcott because it's like, no, like this vehicle is not a symbolic thing of my dick, but really is to actually be a symbol of order. What the heck does that mean? So Mac goes on and breaks it down that the minute he is to go on and get in his car and turn the ignition and the car runs, there seems to be some kind of continuity within the universe, and he is to just kind of have a sense of calm being put into every situation that he is going to make his way to, because all is just law and order and justice and good in the world, that his car is to work and whatever. So Westcott is just kind of like, oh, okay, all right, buddy, all right. So we then have uh, a therapist of sorts that is making his way to Ellis, and it seems that both of them had come to some like religious commune of sorts. So they're to be in very much like uh like friar like robes, or whatever is to be commonly like the brown religious like robish things, cloaks and whatever. I don't know exactly what those are called. Let me know in the comments below if you know exactly what that's called, because heaven forbid I just call them cloaks or whatever. But we would have this therapist that is going on and speaking with Ellis, stating that, like, well, hey, like, it seems that we have called your partner, and he is to be well aware um, that you are to be his partner, but probably doesn't know anything about your actual like problems. And The therapist, it seems, is to state that Ellis hasn't had much of any real episodes, and that is to, of course, be simply because he's been there for like 2 years now. So the therapist is going to state that it's like, well, hey, like, yeah, like, you seem to be the most sane person I know. And Ellis is like, well, that's a weird statement to you because all you deal with was either celibate people or crazy people. So how am I to be the most sane? But so this therapist goes on to say, like, well, yeah, like, just a reminder, like, if you are to go and become a police officer again, like, you will be thrusted into violent acts. And Ellis is like, well, yeah, like, I rationalized or realized that that was going to be a case, and we'll just kind of take it with uh like, legitimately, we'll just kind of cross that bridge when we come to it, kind of thing. So it's like, oh, all right, okay. So, because we come to find out the reasoning of why Ellis had been a police officer, and the backstory of this character that eventually the captain talks to Mac about is that he had gone on to, for 2 days, been taken by these Colombian men and had been tortured. And when Ellis had come back to these people, he had gone on and reenacted the entire torturous thing, word for word, scene for scene, and they were just baffled and confused by why he was going on and doing so. But then eventually they just realized that all of these just personalities were just coming out of nowhere. Like all of these things that at some point Ellis had either seen on TV or movie or whatever. Um, Almost kind of fairly similar to the Cable Guy movie in a bizarrish way, where we would come to find Jim Carrey's character, who is kind of alternating all of these names of and personalities like Larry Tate and this and that, kind of tying into movies or TV shows to disguise himself as these certain personas, to eventually have these people then turn around and realize, oh yeah, like, that's from I Love Lucy, or that's from My Three Sons, or that's from da 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 da. So Ellis then goes on to make his way to this crime scene as we transition to having Mac's character living within his car because he is to mention that his apartment had gone ablaze, and I guess, or or he had to, for one reason or another, have to either be evicted from his apartment. There isn't a clear answer of why he was actually evicted from his place, but he has all of his stuff within his car. So he's sleeping in his car. A man in uniform makes his way to Mac, letting him know that the captain is to want him at this certain crime scene. So we'd have Mac, who is to meet up with the captain, which is to again reunite him with Westkit here. And Mac is not to be alone besides his eventually finding his new partner within this crime scene. Mac is to have a cat called Camus, and I'm just like, okay, like why do we have to really put in this cat here? But then again, like, I guess it does help for a little bit Ellis's character, but I'll get into that. So Matt goes on and is talking to the captain about this case. There seems to be a dead body placed within this area that is to seemingly have its head separated from his bate. So we'd have this cat to be played up as some kind of joke, as Westkit is to go on and state, like, oh, like, why did you get a cat? Like, don't normally, if you're to, like, have a animal solve a case isn't that commonly a dog? And Max is just like, ha 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 ha. So we then turn around and have this all really focus on uh, the fact that uh, considering missing doing any kind of police work for 2 years would possibly cause a person going back into a murder scene lose their lunch and just hurl away. And we'd find that person who is vomiting off to the side to be Ellis, who is to be Mac's partner. And so the two of them are to go on and meet. So we would then all of a sudden start to see Ellis, who is at this crime scene, who is going on and, like, in his own way, doing some unusual reenactments of what possibly had kind of taken place. Like, excuse me, if you had gone on and seen the show Monk, at certain points we would start to realize that further and further that show would start to play out, that eventually Monk would just have these kind of weird kind of things that he would go on and do to just kind of figure out the scene, and eventually just kind of touching things and kind of looking around and analyzing every piece of what's kind of going on within the whole entire locale. We're going on to have Ellis that is somewhat doing a similar case here, where he himself is going on and having some kind of bizarrish reenactment, gunning down certain things within his own mind, and then like unraveling this certain dead character's pants to then have a bizarrish reasoning for, okay, why did you go on and do so? So we would have Ellis that goes on and re-explains what all had happened and transpired within the events of this crime to a T, and is stated there is to have been two boats involved, and a person had gone on and jumped who was a fairly large man and had escaped all of this and had been the Queen of Hearts, and that it seems that some of these people were to have been German. And we then would have Mac, who's like, okay, like, explain exactly how you all know that there's two boats involved and that there was to have been a Queen of Heart. Like, how do you know all this? Like, how exactly uh do you understand this whole way of things of this playing out? So Ellis, of course, goes on to explain that the bullet holes that are to be against this wall are obviously to be very inconsistent, very like up and down. So whoever is to have gone on and try to assassinate these people have to have legitimately been a professional caliber, but it seems that it was even more so difficult for them to gun down all of these people because of the consistent splashing of water while they were trying to get uh, to all of these people. So we would then have Ellis that turns around and also is to uh, gotten to this costume piece that had gotten torn away, and the costume piece ends up going on and being revealed as this heart and this queen symbol. It's like, all right, like, we get it, like, someone is to go on and to have, like, worn this attire. Also, it seems that this moment is to just now remind me of, like, Boondock Saints, when Willem Dafoe is to go on and explain what all had happened within the environment and how these things were to have gone the way they did, and he himself is to kind of be in the action within his playing out of what is all to have happened, which is just a very interesting visual to have been placed within that film. But so we then would again have to figure out, okay, how are most of these people German? So Ellis ends up going on to explain that there is to have been a broken leg from one of the victims, and the broken leg is to have this surgical repair pin. And the surgical pin had this certain company name on it, which is to, of course, be very German. But I guess another connection would be just the clear underwear that they were going on and wearing, because I guess in the European countries, there are to have underwear that doesn't legitimately have the pee holes to kind of whip it out and just kind of pee so easily, because we just have different styles of underwear, it seems. So that is to go on and just be like, aha. So we would also have the yellow pegs that also Ellis had gone on to pull out certain uh, bullets to better understand who these people are, if they were professionals or not. But anyways, kind of getting too much into the details of things, my apologies. But still, it'll happen even more so, sadly enough. So we have Mac that's just like, man, like, I guess I should be taking notes. Like, all right, like, he had answered every little detail that I was to have gone on and had. And Ellis goes on and applaud Mac for the fact that he had been so meticulously um, in the wanting to counteract everything that Ellis had gone on to state and figure out questions to that figuring out that Ellis had gone on to try to do here. So we then transition to have both Mac and Ellis sharing a ride together. And while we are to, of course, be riding here, we would go on to have uh, Ellis, who immediately is to want to cut off the music because it is to just kind of distract him from his own personal rhythms and whatever. And then Mac is to ask Ellis to start like holding the steering wheel, which bizarrely does not go on and trigger any personality thing, because at some point Ellis does state that he cannot drive, or like it triggers a bunch of so he was technically driving, but it didn't trigger anything. So I was just kind of confused why, like, they kind of put a big hole right there within that scene, but I guess that's just me. But so maybe you had that thought too. So Matt goes on to start to roll a cigarette or a doobie or whatever it savors his flavor for this day. So Matt goes on and starts to roll this thing up, and Ellis is like, "Yeah, about that." Like, yeah, it hurts my lungs and hurts my throat and blah, blah, blah. So Alice is like, so do you want me to not smoke? Is what you're telling me? And Alice is like, yeah, well, yeah. So Mac is just like, okay, it was a bad habit, anyways. So Alice is to then notice that there is to be a cat within the car, and Ellis asks Mac, it's like, well, is this going to be a consistent thing that you're going to have this cat everywhere? And Mac is like, well, I think it's just going to be a temporary thing. Why? And Ellis is like, well, I'm very much allergic to cats. And Mac is just like, oh my god, like, you're going to be the most difficult person now, aren't you? And Ellis is looking at Mac, is like, am I annoying you? And Mac is like, oh no, like, you're fine. Like, Is there anything else that I just need to just correct for you right now? And Ellis just stated, it's like, well, like, you're driving. Like, can you drive a little bit slower? And so all of a sudden, Mac slams on the brakes. All of his craft just starts falling forward. And Mac then tells Ellis, after kind of piling a lot of his stuff back into the back, just be like, okay, then, like, I'll drive a little bit slower now. So both Mac and Ellis return to the precinct to then uh, have then Mac figure out a way to give up his cat to Rachel, as well as also try to hit on her. And uh, Rachel is kind of telling, like, Mac, you just need a woman in your life. Like, are you going to be that woman, Rachel? So the two of them talk, and it seems that the next stop upon their journey is to go into this S&M club that is to be somehow tied to Harry, and Harry is to be a supposedly 350-pound man, and so like that could be the connection with the heavy guy who was to have lost his Queen of Hearts costume. So Ellis is to just kind of go off, but then eventually he will uh, gather with Mac to go to this S&M club. So they're going on and driving to this club, and come to find out, one of this guy who I believe in the credits is just called Giant is to be the guy who actually does the voice for Patrick on the SpongeBob SquarePants. I'm like, oh my god, like I've seen this guy in so many like things, like the show Coach, and there was a whole like Mummy movie I think that he was a part of, uh, and just a number of other things. But also, like, I think a lot of people just know him from Patrick, because he just kind of plays the starfish character uh, for that show, whatever it is. I've I've seen maybe an episode here or there of SpongeBob SquarePants, but I legitimately was just kind of fascinated about why everyone really liked that show, because for some reason I could just be like a viewer of it, but then also could not have exactly understood it in a number of just ways. But anyway, like, hey, like that's just other people's choice of content. If it seems to be popular enough to force me to need to check it out, because I've probably checked out all the other Nickelodeon stuff eventually at some point, I hope to do that. Yeah. But anyways, let's move on. So we would get into this S&M club, and immediately both Mac and Ellis are to be stopped by this giant character that is to say, like, hey man, like you can't just come in here, it's a private club. And Mac is just like, well, I'm flashing his badge. He's like, well, like, this is to be like my pass to get into this club. Like, it lets me go anywhere I want. So Mac is to be asking this giant for Shirley Temples, and is to tell him what exactly it is. So the more and more Mac is to metaphorically throw his weight around here, the more it is to end up having him get into hot water. And Mac is to start to get into the throes of fighting and fisticuffs and whichever, uh, with all of these people within this S&M club. And so Ellis is witnessing this violence, and is to all of a sudden start to thrust his hands upon his head. It's like, "Ugh." And then eventually his eyes roll into the back of his head, and he becomes Undertaker. He's like, rest in peace. And he doesn't legitimately say that, but that's basically the Undertaker line, as well as a number of other things that at some point he probably goes on and states. But anyways, full on Dan Aykroyd becomes the Undertaker briefly, and is to eventually turn into these bizarrish personas, is to uh, at some point go on and be Dirty Harry when someone is to kind of confront Ellis's character, like, what the heck is this? And so we would also have Ellis switching into the Lone Ranger, and he goes on to just kind of circle around in a very horse like motion, and he is to go on and grab this chair and smash it against this guy, having him fall forward, and then also again kind of racing around and eventually doing this kind of unusual uh like split kick, where like if you were to go on and realize somebody can go on and do the splits, like yeah, like he basically does the like both legs kind of come out this way and kick these two people, like, oh my god, wow, that's pretty straight up, like that's some talent right there. But yeah, so this like splitish like kick that goes on to take down these two men, and so Ellis ends up getting hit with this bottle, having him realize as he's coming back to the uh to clear Ellis and realize, like, oh my god, I went into an episode. But then he gets up and Mac is like, what the heck was that? And so Ellis is just sitting, oh, it was a distraction. It was a thing to just kind of take these people like off their guard, and I it was just a strategy, and it really worked, and like yeah. So we have Matt going on and telling Ellis, like, well, hey, like uh, call for reinforcements, like uh, call call for some company here. So Harry, who is to run back to get a gun of his, and when he goes on and does this line, I had actually a good laugh at it. So Harry goes on and tells Mac, it's uh, like don't move a muscle, like you moved, like don't you know I'll shoot you. Like how Harry just kind of like does this, like this whole thing was actually very funny. So Mac, of course, to realize that this is Harry here, and so Mac is to need to have him, Harry, and Ellis all going into this vehicle and try and figure out why Harry is involved in all of this. So Harry spills the beans that it's all tied to this character, Steckler. So Harry's the state that he was to have gone on and seen this film involving Adolf and a bunch of Nazis. I'm not going to try to say that word uh, that I just said there as much as possible, because I think that there is some problem with saying it too often and having your video getting demonetized or whatever. So I'm trying to avoid stating those kind of words upon a YouTube video, it seems. So just YouTube stuff is just the goofiest things. You have to just jump through all of these hurdles and whatever, even though it's legitimately like 18 or older for the most point upon this platform. Or it should be, because there, of course, is also to be YouTube Kids and whatever, all that stuff. You're probably like all like 90 years old, right? Every single one of you are watching this video are like a billion years old, I'm sure. Whatever. So just oh, just all the stuff that you have to jump through, just do YouTube video, and then again like hope that it's trending, or a pop culture-ish thing also, because man, is that few and far between. But anyways, I'm griping about garbage stuff. It doesn't freaking matter at the end of it all, because luckily I've had amazing people that are going on and actually checking out the content that I do. So why should I be freaking moaning and groaning? You know what I'm saying? You know what I mean? Probably not. But anyways, so Harry and Mac are talking it out, and Harry is going on and stating that he had seen uh, this very uh, historical tying movie that is to be tied into one of the political officials who is von Metz. And eventually, the reveal towards the end of the film is we would come to find out that von Metz is to actually have been kind of sworn in by Adolf and is to have been part of his regime. And this will eventually hinder him from becoming a political office by, of course, voters having this knowledge of von Metz, kind of eschewing the uh, the voting and the politicking and whatever. Anyways, so but Harry is to also say that this is basically a smut film that they are to have gone on and also witnessed. And so anybody who is to have gone on and seen this film, Grimmer and all of these guys are trying to go on and murder them. So we have Harry going on to explain this, and it seems that Ellis, through this side mirror, is to see that Grimmer is to be following them from behind. So Ellis is to try to point out to Mac that, like, hey man, check your side mirror because something's going on from behind us. Like, somebody's following us. This is weird. But then all of a sudden, finally, like, Ellis is to force Mac, hey, you need to look behind you now because Grimmer is to be coming out of this vehicle with this bazooka firing away. So luckily, they get out of the nick of time to swerve away from this bazooka launching. And so that, of course, is when Ellis gets out of this car and is start to be performing these Wizard of Oz like characters. He ends up at some points, as well as now, going on and portraying the Cowardly Lion. I am the king of the forest. Ruff, ruff, ha ha. He doesn't go on and state that, but like that's the only thing that I really remember from the Wizard of Oz. Like put him up, yeah, the same character. Man, if he would have really went through the real dialogue of or catalog of all kinds of other kind of goofy-ish like characters and voices and whatever. Like, man, if he would have legitimately been an all-out expert to know like hundreds and hundreds of voices of all these characters, he could have been going on and doing a bunch of just weird comedic stuff within this film. And also, like, he never once, I think, goes on and actually does Yogi Bear, which is to be the thing that he's actually to be known for, technically, even though a lot of times people would probably state that there probably is a better person who has gone on and done Yogi Bear besides Dan Aykroyd. It is what it is. But so, uh, oh, like a picnic basket, whatever. So, we gotta have Dan Aykroyd's like, put him up. And is to seemingly have this car almost run him over. So, Mac is to figure out a way to get Ellis away from this car to just alert him of his impending running over. And so Ellis kind of rolls off to the side. So both Mac and Ellis are firing away at this car as it drives off. So again, we're having Mac asking Ellis, like, well, what did you do there? And Ellis is like, oh, it was another distraction. It was another this and that. but really it was just him going off on his episodes, and Ellis going on and doing the Wicked Witch of the West, where it's like, I'll get you a little pretty and your little dog too. Hurrah! My Wicked Witch of the West needs a little bit of work, but I wasn't really going fully into it. But so here's where we go into the Star Trek cast of characters for the most point. So we'd have Mac and Ellis and Harry like chasing alongside the Grimmer guy's car, and so now Ellis is driving this car and he's starting to have episodes. So there was to have also, I think, within the S&M club, like Ellis just bizarrely turns into this British guy. Hello, governor. That is to be the most stereotypical thing that I could say as a German accent, whatever. But yeah, I'm just trying to do my best to just kind of figure out what all he had stated, like the Dirty Harry, like, do you feel lucky, punk? Do you? Kind of very generic, Dirty Harry, but still. I got blisters on my fingers, Beatles and whatever. Anyways, so probably going into a number of impressions that weren't even anywhere in this film, but like when you tend to just kind of throw your voice anywhere, like legitimately, I could have just done a Bobby's World or Gremlins or whatever. I could have probably done that. Anyways, Ellis driving. He's driving. And he's going on to like stick his head out the window, and be like, "Hey, bad guys!" And so, while all of a sudden he's driving, he becomes the entire cast of Star Trek, and he's like, "Captain's log, supplemental. We've got to go into warp." And Mac is like, "Don't go into warp." And so we'd have Ellis that's losing complete control of the car, and he's grinding the car against this wall. And all of a sudden, we then switch Ellis into this kind of, I think, NASCAR guy for some goofy reason, and he's going on and having this very southern accent and having his mouth open wide like this, and so he goes on to then like cross to this other side of this thing to still try to get close to the Grimmer car, and they're up on this like almost ramp like thing, and again, like, we're busting out every single Star Trek cast member that they can have. Bones, and he didn't do a Spock, he just did Scotty. The only thing that I remember from Scotty is like, Captain, these lithium crystals are gonna blow. There'll be whales here. Hello, computer. He didn't even do Chekhov. He didn't do the nuclear vessels. He didn't do any of that. He could have gone and done some like Sweet Decay. He could have been like, oh my. Captain, course laid in. None of that. He didn't do any of the like, he didn't do like Spock. I don't know if I have a really good Spock or not, because I haven't really done it that often. Live long and prosper. God, that was awful. Ugh. Anyways, the Spock needs a little work. But anyways, so Ellis careens into these crates of all of these chickens, and Ellis starts doing all these cast members that are to be having problems legitimately like being able to move the vehicle, the car, because the car is dead. We would have at some points where Mac is to try to figure out how to like relieve Captain Kirk of his duties and all kinds of other things, while they're just like, man, he's crazy, what's going on here? So Mac goes to the captain and is just like, hey man, like I had to be dealing with like Captain Kirk and Captain Kangaroo and Captain Crunch and all these kind of other characters. Like, what's going on with this guy? So the captain has to be forced to explain to Mac the whole torturing for 2 days things with the Colombians, and that for some reason or other, Ellis had just collected all of these personalities, and for how much so that Ellis wanted so badly to just get involved within uh, the police or to be involved in the force. The captain, who ends up being, of course, Ellis's uncle, is to not be able to deny him that. So Mac is to just kind of laugh at the captain a little bit and just be like, "Oh, like he's your nephew." So the two of them go on and just kind of walk off here after going on and giving Ellis much more of a backstory for his character. So Mac meets up with Ellis and is to go on and say it's like, well, yeah, like you probably much more understand my condition now, and you probably no longer want to be a partner with me. And Mac is just like, well, like if anything, like I think that we kind of have like one brief run with us, but like let's like have your captain just kind of explain how long that's going to be for. So we then turn around and have Von Metz, who is doing this interview, which then has the guy from Jigsaw, or the Saw movies, the guy that you know is the villain from those films, is to appear within the scene, and for the life of me, can't go on and easily find where exact. Oh, he's Gerber, 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 Gerber. That sounds better than anything else that I just stated. So Gerber. You could figure out how it's actually pronounced when you go through IMDb. Or if you're German, you probably easily know what that actually is to be pronounced. But so Gerber goes on to meet up with Grimmer and is to kind of like hold on to Grimmer and just be like, hey man, like what the heck are you doing? Like you should have kind of swept this all under the rug by now. And Grimmer is like, hey man, like nobody that works with you likes me whatsoever, and so like if anything, like I'm gonna get my stuff like swept in the rug, believe me, in good time, but also like never touch me again or you're gonna regret it, because I'm gonna lock lips with you, just showing you how crazed I am. So Mac, of course, is looking for a home to rest his head on, and Ellis is going and tell Mac, it's like, well, hey, like you have a home now, and Mac is like, oh, what am I getting myself into? So Mac comes to find that Ellis's place of humble abode is to completely be white. Every single thing is to be white within it, even Ellis himself. Ha 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 ha! That was a race joke. Anyways, that was stupid, but I got a good laugh out of it, my own self. So Ellis goes on to then state the reasoning why all of this is just to be as plain as it possibly can be, is because that at some point it may help Ellis through the transitional process of eventually figuring out who he is and eventually adding color upon his place. So Mac ends up going like, okay, like, hey man, like, where am I gonna rest my head for the night? Like, so Mac takes this room that, of course, also is just completely just all whited out, and so Mac is like, all right, okay, like I'll just kind of deal with this for the night, and maybe I won't be here past this. But so Ellis is to re-knock on Mac's door and just be like, hey man, just letting you know that more than likely, because I have had some episodes lately, might just have some nightmares that may just want you to just be wary of. And if anything, I think they might not absolutely be violent, but hey, just kind of lock your door just in case. So Max is just be like, oh, okay, sure, yeah, whatever. But then all of a sudden, like, Mac is to be sprung out of his bed by all of these kind of googly, whatever, goofy, horrific, and weird, goofy, like, mixing of Dan Aykroyd doing all of these voices. So Mac is to go on and put this desk in front of the chair, in front of the door here, and he then is to take his gun and probably put it by his underneath his pillow and just be like, okay, like if anything, like I'm just like whatever happens, like I'm gearing up for it. So we would then have both Mac and Ellis making their way to this certain location. They are going to think that they're meeting somebody, but they're actually going to meet this federal officer. So the two of them have this really fun chat before they make their way into this locale. So we would realize that the two of these men are being followed by this car that is to have this woman known as Riva within the IMDb here. But so we would make our way into this building where they are to be met by this federal agent who is to be known as Smiley. What a goofy name. So Smiley is to go on and tell these two men, of course, that Smiley is to go on and take on this case. And at some point, eventually, when the federal agents are all good and ready, to then hand the case back over to both Mac and Ellis. And that's what really is to be all very well and good, just kind of stated within the only thing that really gives a about within them talking. So both Ellis and Mac are to look at this guy and just be like, man, what a putz. Yeah, he was a putz, right? Uh, so they walk off to find this Riva character to be with this man, and they're hugging and they're whatever. And so both Mac and Ellis are trying to figure out who exactly this Riva character is. And so Ellis starts to break down like the profile of this girl, and it's assumed that she is a cat named Boopsie, and that she likes men with hairy chests and and this and that and all of these things in just utter detail. And Mac turns to Ellis and is like, you really think so? And Ellis is like, no, I have no clue who she is. Like, he's to think that she's to be like some like CIA agent and whatever, which ends up not being the case. So he's rattling all these things off, which eventually I don't believe any of them is actually true. But hey, wouldn't it have been funny if Ellis would have been completely right about every single one of these things to just prove how really good that he actually really is? But anyways, we'd have both Mac and Ellis that are really putting the pressure on Harry here, trying to figure out a way for him to confess or get some kind of more evidence or things that they can kind of pry from him here. And in all honesty, Harry just has nothing. So Mac is to be forced to release Harry because he's innocent in all of this. So we would then turn around and have Ellis that is getting on this phone call and he's seemingly pretending that he's getting a hold of these news anchors in this news outlet to let them know that Harry is gone on to be seemingly in full involvement with the police to kind of like have some involvement within this case and yada yada. So Harry's like, "Oh my God, you're telling the news people all of this," and so like if Harry is to be in desperation for protection, like he's looking at these people now, they're just like, okay, like, hey, like whatever I need to do at this point to just kind of get you guys to just kind of keep me protected. Like I'll sing like the birds of New York or whatever. Anyways, so by the time Harry, Ellis, and Mac start to leave this building, they realize what a mistake that is because Smiley and his federales are making their way to meet up with Mac, Ellis, and Harry here. So both Mac, Ellis, and Harry decide that they're going to run away from Smiley and the federales so they wouldn't take this case away from them. So they make this way to this parking garage to get into this van, which evidently is to be seemingly managed by this guy named Willie of all things, but he doesn't legitimately have a name in this movie, but he's just called Willie in IMDb for whatever goofy reason. So they drive off with this van, and we do not have Ellis driving in this case because they're like, heck no, you're not driving. So bizarrely, all of a sudden, while they're driving, Harry's seat ends up getting kind of broken here, and both Ellis and Harry are just kind of sliding all over the back of this van crazily. So Mac is just wildly driving, and the other people are going on to feel the effects within this chase. So we'd have Riva that is to go on and try to intercept these federales by crashing into their car so that way Mac and Ellis and Harry can just drive off here. So Smiley's to now be like yelling at this woman and is to want to figure out a way for her to just get out of this whole entire situation of them just being crashed into one another. So the federales just continue to keep driving. So Ellis, Harry, and Mac make their way to this train station. So we'd have Mac telling Ellis like, "Hey, like get him on a train so we can get the heck out of here." So Mac goes on and talks to Smiley, and Smiley's to say like, "Well, hey, I have a paperwork here, I have a warrant here, and." We have Mac that's going like, well, I have some paperwork here that trumps your paperwork, so blah, like, who cares? So the two of them are just kind of doing a deck measuring thing here, a big old deck. Somebody has a big deck they just want to slam down right now, just work it out and just slam it on the floor. If you know what I mean? Just kickstanding, just willy nilly, just. So all of this lands to have Mac, Ellis, and Harry on this train, and so Smiley is getting on the train to follow them, is to buy tickets for this train. So by the time that Smiley and his Federales are on this train and the train is going, we have Ellis, Harry, and Mac who are to jump back off of the train and just be waving at Smiley and the Federales. Just like, hey, like, see you later, because we're not going on that train. So they get onto another train and they state it's like, well, yeah, like, we'll get onto this train, but then we'll turn around and kind of get a rent-a-car and we'll kind of drive back. So when the three of them are going through this train, they eventually meet up with this Israeli Secret Service person named Riva, and they go on and they kind of pat her down and find out who she is. And it's like, okay, she's the Israeli Secret Service, and like she's on our side. So the four of them get together and legitimately kind of focus on stating like how Harry was to have gotten involved in all of this, and they break down that the whole kind of smut film was to have been involved in this kind of political election like thing, and like that had eventually gotten Steckler involved, and so many people had to go on and die because of this, and yada yada yada. So, and Grimmer is going to be that guy that's to try to kill everybody off involved, and this and that. So kind of cluing us in of kind of what we kind of figured out throughout most of this movie. But if there was to have been any kind of confusion within this movie, here is the moment where they're trying to go on and clear it up as much as they can. So Grimmer is to be inside this helicopter flying over the train that Harry, Mac, and Ellis, and now Riva are inside. So Harry, of course, looking out the window next to this helicopter, is like, oh my god. So our characters go on to decide, like, okay, like here's our plan. Like, it seems that this helicopter is going on to try and like stop us from getting to our location. So we're gonna figure out a way to get off this train. Is the common thing that they're gonna try and do. So as these Germans are making their way onto this train, we would again start to have Ellis, who is having episodes that ends up becoming Roadrunner. Is a blah, 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 and he is to just kind of speed his way and ram into people and kick them in the nuts, and just go on to just really like wreak havoc here. And Harry and Mac are realizing like how insane Ellis is, but Mac is just like, hey man, it's freaking working, so who cares? Like, we go on to have Ellis, who is to like go into Butch and Sundance. I don't even have like, I really need to go on and watch like Butch and Sundance, because I think I've seen like a trailer or clips of it, but it's been so long ago. If anything, like, I know it's some kind of Western thing, but I don't really know. I have no clue. So, and I know it's a classic thing. I know it's a classic story, but I never, for the life of me, really cared enough to check that out. And at some point, I'll probably regret it. But so, and that'll seem to be a thing that's like, oh no, he didn't see that. Finally, he gets stumped with a film. Yeah, I've probably seen like clips of it and a trailer of it, but it's been a million years ago. I've probably even seen the film and not even remember that I had even seen the film because I've seen so much content. But so, or more than likely, I'll probably watch this movie and just be like, yeah, I've never seen a lick of this, but I know it exists. So, we would then have the three men, and Riva is to just kind of be surely there behind. Uh, the three men are to go on to find their way to this bridge, and they jump off to the side to make their way through the watery, rafterish, waterfallish things that they are to be thrusted upon. So they're all starting to drown within this water, and Ellis is going through any Rolodex of cataloging of characters that have some kind of weird, bizarre connection with the water, and that's when we get the Popeye, um, Popeye the Sailor Man. I eat me spinach and and the Love Boat. We will be taking another cruise. The Love Boat theme song. So Ellis and all of the guys make their way out of the water, and Grimmer is now having this helicopter and trying to siphon out where these people are, but of course he can't spot them. So eventually they just kind of fly off. So Mac ends up turning to Ellis and is to just like, hey, like, Ellis, you okay? And Ellis is like, I don't know. Like he's just shaken by the fact that he's continually doing so many episodes now that eventually when both Mac and Ellis have a legitimate heart to heart, Ellis is much more so worried that at some point that like maybe the next time he's going to have one of these episodes, he may not come back. That eventually he'll just be gone. But so Matt goes on and has a heart to heart with Ellis. It's like, you know what, buddy? Like, you know what the reason why, like, I wanted to go on and I wanted to be, like, just partner with you? Because I need your help. But then also, like, when looking at you, like, I feel like I can help you. So, like, and so he, like, goes into this kind of very poetic, like, thing um, about the light and the darkness and whichever, not giving it a real good fair shake of what he goes on and actually says. But they're to go on and just kind of start howling at the moon. And Alice is go on and just kind of do this one howl. It's like, no, 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 like really just belt it out. And so both of them start howling. And Harry looks at both of them. He's like, oh my God, now both of them are freaking crazy. But yeah, like, they're just more and more just realizing that they're like the perfect like partners for one another, and like, hey man, like whatever happens, we're just gonna roll with it. We're just gonna like freaking like, hey, if you become Rambo, then that'll be perfect for this situation. And then if you become like Bugs or Daffy Duck or whatever, like maybe you can just figure out how that's gonna fit in like whatever scenario that we're just part of. Like we'll just figure it out whenever this comes. So we'd have the three men making their way to this facility that ends up being this kind of health spa. It seems, it looks like, because it's just a lot of uh, like either steam rooms or bathing-ish like areas. People within uh, a, a two-way mirror having bathing suits on, just half naked, pretty much. So there is to be a two-way mirror, and it's to be this office that uh, Harry is to go on and be asking if any German people had gone on to show up with this facility, and his secretary is to go on and state no. So Harry is to go on and open up a thing of arsenal for both Mac and Harry here. So they go on and they kind of hide these guns, and that's when Mac tells Ellis like, well, hey man, like if you ever have an episode, hopefully you become Rambo. The perfect character to be like tied into this scenario here. So they start to make their way through this facility, and they go through this steam area, and we have some people going on and saying like, well, hey man, like how about you go on and grab a towel and join us? And both of them like, ha ha ha, like, yeah, I'm trying to cut down. So both Mac and Ellis make their way through this area and is trying to trick people into going on and speaking German. So Ellis, it seems, knows German, so he starts to speak a certain phrase of it. No one answers, so he's like, ah. So they then further to just be like, well, wait a minute, like maybe there's another thing I can go on and try. So Ellis goes on and sneezes, and somebody says, Gesundheit. And it's like, aha, like, we got one. And so this guy comes in the fray, starts trying to murder down Mac, but Mac ends up firing away upon this German man. And then all of a sudden, all the German men just kind of just fly out of existence, like it's the Grimmer guy, and he's in this facility just waiting to pounce. So Harry starts to man up too, and he grabs this huge gun as well, and he's like you mess with the wrong Jewish man, and he just starts firing away. So, and everybody's like, "All right, Harry, all right, he's getting his groove back." So we have Steckler. He ends up being found within this area, and so like he ends up by the Grimmer men to get a little bit wounded here, and so Mac is telling Alice like, "Hey, grab Steckler here and drag him back uh, into uh, into where Harry is." So Steckler, before he dies, goes on and tells Ellis what he needs to know to go into this locker of 64 or whatever, and the film will be within there, within the Grand Central Station. So because Ellis knows this thing of information, it's like, okay, well, like Grimmer is to realize that Ellis knows this information. So Grimmer wants Ellis because he's the only one who knows where the film is. So he takes Ellis. It's like, all right, like he's going to be my one bargaining chip for me to get to this location. So Harry, Mac, and Ellis are to kind of be forced to go with Ellis and the Grimmer guy to all just make their way to Grand Central Station. And so Harry turns to Riva, who is to be arriving and is to be just kind of behind them. So Harry goes on and shouts, "We're going to Grand Central Station, going to Grand Central Station." And then he lobs over uh, this fence, and he ends up getting injured because of it. He ends up getting some metal in his butt. So a bullet probably lodged within there. But so they make their way to Grand Central Station or Terminal or whatever the goofy thing is, because this is to be like the very traditional like New York film. Even though legitimately, we of course have Mac, who has the Kansas City Redskins jacket on. So where is this movie actually taking place at? I have no clue because I don't know anything about landmarks and whatever. It's very confusing. So Ellis and also Mac are to start to speak in Pig Latin here. So the big takeaway here is eventually they're to have this plan and to try to not get fucked here. So Ellis is stating to Mac that he's not going to go on and tell them what they need to know or tell them the wrong bit of information, regardless of what they do to him. So Mac goes on, is like, okay, like how about you go on and you like you kind of beat down these German guys, and we'll try to run away together and figure out where this thing actually is. But sadly, Ellis ends up just kind of falling here, and now Mac is within this subway car, and he can't get out of it, and he's to try to even figure out a way for this train to stop or reverse or whatever, and it can't do that. So he's like, "Oh crap!" So Mac is now forced to go to this location, find a taxi, or in this case, a bus, to force his way back to Grand Central Station so he can meet up with Ellis and try to save him while he's getting tortured for the information. So Mac returns to the Grand Central Station to have these cops starting to arrest uh, these German guys. So I've goofed up here. So Mac goes to return, and so he ends up figuring out a way to start to defeat these German guys. He goes on to make this sound, so the German guy kind of follows the sound, and so Mac has this garbage can lid, and he kind of slams it on the guy, knocks him down, and further just kind of goes past him. So Mac is to shoot this one gas canister to have all this gasoline be poured upon this one German goon. And while this guy is just kind of walking off with all this gasoline poured upon his body, Mac ends up shooting on the ground to ignite this gasoline line of things that eventually will burn this one man who is just kind of running around with this gasoline poured all over his body. So transition to Grimmer now torturing Ellis here for the information, and Mac then shows up at the rescue to force Grimmer to now like assume where the film is, but then again, Ellis gave Grimmer the wrong information. So Ellis goes on and tells Mac the right information about this locker. So Mac starts making his way to this locker room, sees Reva, and it's like, hey, like he just bizarrely just does these weird hand signals, and then he just kind of runs off. It's like probably just, hey, like stay here, we'll figure things out. So Matt goes on and is to find the film and is to put a gun upon Grimmer here, but then he finds out that he is to be outnumbered, and so he just kind of throws these lockers upon these Grimmer guys and runs off with the film. So Mac makes his way to this high voltage, uh, like air conditioning lidded area that looks just kind of very interesting of enough visual to kind of finish up this film, but also is to be this kind of sign like area that we'll come to find out is to be uh, just an easy chucking thing to go from this sign to then the Israeli Secret Service people that are to obtain this film when the film ends up getting chucked by Mac here. Because Grimmer will go on and just kind of uh, mock Mac here and just be like, well, yeah, like I'm definitely going to get this film and this and that. And like I basically have already won here. I'm doing my victory lap. And then all of a sudden, we consistently hear the many different personalities of which that Ellis has gone on to be seemingly known for throughout this film, and it's to give us the Woody the Woodpecker and all this kind of randomness of whatever he is to really just stay here. And at some point, he ends up going on and doing like Humpty Dumpty. Humpty Dumpty had a great fall, and so Ellis chucks the film. Grimmer shoots him in the leg. So Mac is a state that Ellis has a gun, and then Ellis states to Mac, it's like, "Oh no, I don't have a gun." But then Ellis, after Mac is to shut the film, Ellis is to tell both of these men, he's like, "Well, yeah, I do have a gun after all." And Humpty Dumpty had gotten back on that wall, and so he shoots Grimmer here, kills him, has him falls on this mass number of just fruit assortment. So we would then go on and transition to the news, who is doing this coverage of Von Metz, uh, who in the background of this uh, debate or wherever he is to legitimately have been at, there is to be this video that is to be shown showcasing Von Met, who has had some history with Adolf and is to be a part of his regime, and he's all just upset and but there's to be clear evidence that this guy's birthmark is to match the younger version of this other guy, so it's to have legitimately been a connection there. If an age would kind of be like, oh, is that really him or not? So we transition to have Mac now at this hospital, and he's meeting with these nurses, kind of making the rounds, realizing that Harry was to have gotten shot in the butt, and now he's needing to have all of these orderlies and nurses try to figure out how to get him into this wheelchair for Mac to be able to wheel him around in this hospital. So both Harry and Mac make their way to Ellis's room, where it seems Ellis is just kind of performing for all of these kids. He's going on and doing all of these voices, and I'm like, okay, like, is he slipping into these personalities again, or all of a sudden can he now like control all of this, and he's just kind of performing for these people now? So Ellis then turns around and is to tell both the guys, like, "Oh yeah, like I'm just kind of performing for the kiddies here. I'm just kind of doing these Draculas and all these monster things." So we finish up this movie uh with both Mac and Ellis having this heart to heart, where Ellis is going on and stating, or Mac is to go on to state to Ellis that it's like, well, hey man, like I'm gonna go on and enjoying me and Harry are joining the Israeli Secret Service, but the only problem is like I really have to change religions, and like I also have to get circumcised. And Ellis is like, oh man, you're ribbing me, aren't you? And Mac is like, like gotcha. So Ellis is like, man, you're even more crazier than I am, and that's how they just kind of finish up the film. We also have Harry that is to go on and mention that he is to like be a spy, and he's to be a fake fat guy, and this goofy thing, and he's to go on and tell uh, the tale of him going on and thwarting Von Metz, which is technically true, but then also uh, is to probably be a lot of fabrication going on there. But so with that said, that finishes up this film. I'm going to get the heck out of here. Let me know in the comments below how you were to have somehow had reasoning for checking out this review, because at some point it's always nice to just have a comment every once in a while. But anyways, I'm going to get out of here. Goodbye, everybody. Bye, everybody.